But for everything else, I really put it together on my own. And so it's been that way, I would say, for the last maybe 5 years or so. And kind of like you said, over time, you find your group. Every year has looked different from us,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
That's the reality. We have it's an evolving thing. I like to call it. I blog about homeschooling, and I like to call it our homeschool journey because literally it has been that. That might sound kind of cheesy or whatever, but it's true. It's literally a journey because you learn something. Like when I first stumbled upon Charlotte Mason's, I guess, teachings or her philosophy, I was really attracted to it because at the time my oldest was first grade and my middle daughter, I think, was preschool. And then my son was like two. So I was like overwhelmed and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this feels doable. This takes some of the pressure off.
Hey everybody, it's Lacey again. I am super excited to have you here today. We are going to be talking to Courtney Dunlap. She was one of our experts in our recent homeschool summit. You can still take advantage of that summit and all the wisdom that we shared there. Had so much great feedback. People have just gained so much confidence and feeling way more capable of doing the thing that they want to do with their homeschool through participating in that summit. Courtney is an author and a homeschool mom, and I'm really excited to just get to know her a little bit better. And I'm sure that this episode will be full of some really good wisdom that you can apply to your homeschool or just your parenting or really just to life. We just love learning on life, and I know that Courtney does too, and I think it's going to be a really fun conversation. So Courtney, I would love for you to start at the beginning, sort of. So, I know you because you homeschool, and that's how we kind of stumbled upon your work. What kind of brought you there? So really start at the beginning. What was your education experience?
Oh, as far as when I was my upbringing,
Yes.
so I am a product of the public school system in New Jersey, elementary school and then high school. Middle school, my parents, they put us into the church's private school that we were attending at the time. Just when I say they, I should say my sister and myself. But that was just for me. It was just about three. It was very short, like 3 years. And so everything else was our public school system experience. And actually, it was a really good experience. I really enjoyed school. I had great teachers. I grew up in a black suburb. So majority of my teachers look like me and I just didn't really think anything different, like majority of the kids, they came from stable 2-parent families and you may have some families who weren't that makeup, but majority of the kids I grew up with, they knew their parents, they were in the home. So my mom, she actually is a public school teacher as well. She was in a different district. So I had the benefit, I should say, of over the summer break. She would definitely keep my sister, my brother, myself busy with additional work and projects. And my mom, it's so funny. She and I are very similar now that I'm a mom and I homeschool. She always was taking us to, a local, the Lenni Lenape tribe was in our area. So they would have yearly events. So my parents, every year we would go to that event, like a cultural experience. And as
Wow.
a kid, I just thought it was cool. I didn't think
Yeah.
anything of it. I'm like, that was just normative. If there was a science fair going on somewhere, we were loading in the car, we were going. So my mom was doing experiences like that throughout our childhood. It was just very normal for me. I didn't think anything of it.
Mm-hmm.
So once my husband and I got married, we've been married 13 years and we actually have 4 children. When my oldest was starting out school age, the big question everybody was asking is, what are you going to do about school? At the time, we were living in Philadelphia and we just were not comfortable with putting her into the school system. I always say this whenever I talk about this experience in our lives that we have tons of friends who teach in the Philly school district and they're amazing. And, my hat goes off to them, but we just weren't comfortable with the system itself. So we had to start kind of exploring our options. My husband actually was the one who had the idea about homeschooling. And I was like, no. I got my degree in undergrad in psychology, and then I went on to get a master's in Christian counseling. So at the time, I was practicing in my field. I was doing individual and family therapy in people's homes, and I was expecting our 3rd child at the time when our daughter was becoming school age. Mm-hmm. So the big question, like I said, was what are we going to do? We ended up stumbling upon a how to homeschool workshop that the local library was putting on. I don't even know how we found it. And we went, he and we brought our 4-year-old daughter with us and our other daughter at the time, she was 2. And we sat through it. And prior to it, I was very skeptical. The homeschool families that I had brief encounters with when I was a kid, they were different. And I was like, well, that's not for me.
Yeah.
So, I didn't know anyone who looked like me who was a homeschooler either.
Right.
So it just wasn't normative for my circle of people. Oh, I should say, no, I did have one good friend at the time who was homeschooling. I will say that. But yeah, so we went through the workshop and I was blown away. I was like, wow, I really felt like it was something we could do. The presenters, they were very clear. They were presenting the ways in which you can go about homeschooling. And, they presented statistics, even for like testing averages between, public school, private school, charter, and homeschoolers.
Wow.
And hands down, the homeschoolers were like blown off the chart. They were just on their own category of themselves. So my husband and I were like, all right, let's try it. So, and I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I knew 2 homeschoolers. One of my cousins, who I wasn't super close with at the time, because she's a lot older than me, she was homeschooling her daughter, and we hadn't really ever connected in that way just because we didn't grow up together.
Sure.
In that age range. She's probably 15 years older than me. So, but she and I had a daughter around the same age. Her daughter was about a year or 2 older. So I remember reaching out to her, like, can I please come over? I don't know what I'm doing. I want to homeschool. So that was the first real time she and I started kind of building a relationship in that way, because we had the commonality. And she really put my fears at ease. And she was like, you know what? For these early grades, you just need to focus on phonics sounds and math. Over time, you can build more subjects. Because me, I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to buy a curriculum. And I'm being crazy. I was scouring the internet at the time. I'm looking all these blogs up on Google, and it was crazy. And I was really feeling overwhelmed. I remember crying to my husband, oh my gosh, our kids are going to be illiterate and it's going to be all my fault. Like literally real tears. He will confirm this story many times. And my cousin helped to put me at ease. So that was our introduction to homeschooling. And just now this week, we started year 8.
Wow. That's great. Isn't it funny how it flies by, it's just insane. Because I remember those early days for us too, when my child was like 3 or 4 and I'm like, what are we going to do? Are we going to start the, signing up for kindergarten? And then, from where do you go from there? If you're going to choose to homeschool, you do feel like, well, then I need to have a really good curriculum because I need to be keeping in line with what they're doing in the school system. But yeah, I mean, you kind of eventually you started to, you're like not worried about it anymore, right? After the first couple of years.
Yeah.
Worried about different things maybe. So tell me then, okay, you were looking at all the sort of different options out there. What would you call yourself in terms of like methodology with your homeschool? Where do you fall now? What does it look like for you?
Loosey goosey. No, I'm playing. I mean, on some level, it is a bit loosey goosey. We do a Charlotte Mason-esque approach. We are not like strict Charlotte Masoners, just because maybe I'm a little too lazy. I don't know. In terms of Charlotte Mason, we do a ton of reading. Like we just have books upon books upon books. Whenever we approach the subject, there's going to be books involved. We do narration and we try to keep our lessons short. That's really the gist of what we do in terms of Charlotte Mason. When it comes to some of the more foundational subjects like math, phonics, reading, I purchase a curriculum because I just don't trust myself. But for everything else, I really put it together on my own. And so it's been that way, I would say, for the last maybe 5 years or so. And kind of like you said, over time, you find your groove. Every year has looked different from us, really.
Yeah.
That's the reality. It's an evolving thing. I like to call it, I blog about homeschooling, and I like to call it our homeschool journey, because literally it has been that. That might sound kind of cheesy or whatever, but it's true. It's literally a journey, because you learn something. Like when I first stumbled upon Charlotte Mason's, teachings or her philosophy, I was really attracted to it because at the time, my oldest was first grade and my middle daughter, I think, was preschool. And then my son was like 2. So I was like overwhelmed and I was like, oh, this feels doable. This takes some of the pressure off. So, but yeah, and I was definitely stricter or more strict at that time. But again, over time, things have happened. I eventually, was pregnant with our fourth child, and that school year was very interesting. I was just like survival mode.
Yeah.
Like, let's figure this out. And my oldest, she did basically almost everything online. We used Easy Peasy. So
Oh,
yeah,
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 forget. That's so interesting because we're the same. Our kids read a ton. We use our foundation kind of curriculum is a Charlotte Mason based one, so it's just tons and tons of books that they're reading all the time. And I look back at my educational experience, and I'm saying this to put people at ease who are like reading more. Really, I can't even get my kids to read what they're supposed to already. I can't imagine adding more books in. But when I was in elementary and onward, I didn't want to read what somebody was telling me to read. I guess there was something about the books that we read that were, I don't know, it just didn't, I wasn't drawn to reading when I was a kid. But now I raised kids who love to read. And I think it's because they're not bogged down by all of the other kind of rote work that they have to do. And, I think a lot of it in those early grades, especially in public school, we're asking kids to read when they're already exhausted. And it's like reading when you're exhausted just makes you fall asleep, right? You're just like, I can't do this. It's not coming, you're not actually retaining it. And when you read when you're alert and awake and that's your schoolwork, it's a different experience. So I wonder if
yeah.
you feel that way too, because when we talk about all this reading, I'm like, this would not have appealed to me when I was first starting as a homeschooler. I would have been like, that sounds like a nightmare. But
Yeah, I agree with you. And the reality is thinking through what you're reading. I probably, yeah, maybe since year two, maybe even year one, I don't know. I've always had a precedent of, as I'm planning for the new year, I always ask my kids, what do you want to learn this year? And I'm always sure to incorporate that. Of course, we're going to do the things that are like must. Like, okay, you need to learn how to read, you need to learn how to count. Like, those things are non-negotiable for me. But outside of that, when it comes to, the other subjects, like, okay, for studying history or science, I want to hear from them. What are you interested in learning about? And so those are the books we'll fill up on, and we'll just kind of dive deep. And also we always do, like, in the morning, in our morning time, it's kind of like a circle time in a way, I guess. We do our devotion, and then we have a constant family novel that we're reading. That's exciting, because there's times where my kids, I'll have them act it out, or I might even act it out.
that's
So it's fun. It's like really fun. As my two oldest have grown in their reading abilities, they really actually sometimes want to read instead of me reading for the family novel. And so I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, that's really good practice. Yeah, the same for my kids as well. They enjoy to read in front of people. So what can you share any of those novels? What are some of your favorites that you've read aloud as a family?
Definitely, hands down. 2 years ago, we did the Middle Ages for the school year. And I usually, we studied history in cycles, so we'll focus in on a time period for that year. I guess that's also Charlotte Mason too. Yeah. But I really try to figure out and pull out ways to incorporate that time period in the science that we're doing, the history that we're doing, sometimes even if it overlaps with the Bible, the art we're doing, the writing, whatever. So when we did the Middle Ages, we actually read the original Robin Hood. And I can still remember, like, the first, because it was, with the Old English.
Yes.
So the first couple of pages, it was tough. And I was like, I really don't want to read this.
Yes.
And my kids, 2 years ago, my oldest was 9, then 7, and then 5. So, like, trying to read Old English to a 5-year-old, and I realized, and I know that, for instance, with Charlotte Mason, her approach is read it and don't interject anything, but I just knew I couldn't do that. Like, in the sense of allow the child to narrate back. Like, you don't need to really explain
it to them, right?
Right. But I knew with the Old English, it was flying over their heads. So we would take it almost sometimes paragraph by paragraph, where I would read it, then I would explain it to them in their own terms. So I remember when we first started it, we were all kind of like, and so I asked them, I was like, do you guys want to keep going? And they're like, yeah. So in my mind, I'm like, no. But that was by far the best experience. That book took us probably almost through the entire school year because it's so thick.
Yeah.
And we didn't read it every day.
Right.
And probably by the middle of the school year, the kids were starting to tell me what the Old English meant because they
Oh,
had
I
picked
love
up an
that.
ear for it. They were
Yeah.
understanding it.
Yeah.
And we were acting out the scenes. Like they were, I remember one time they were pretending to be Little John, and my big girls have bathrobes. So they stuffed a pillow in their stomach and put their bathrobe over it, and they were like pretending to have a sword fight as though they were Little John. It was hilarious. So yeah, that by far was like our most favorite reading, even though it started out really rocky.
That is such a like beautiful like just description of how homeschool plays out because I think leaving space for things to go as like in an unplanned way. It's just you gave your kids this opportunity to learn how to get what they could get out of the situation, and I mean that is something that you can't really teach in public school because you have to move on to the next thing. You don't have time to like spread it out. You're not getting it, fine, we're going to move on to the next thing, right? And it just you breeze through, and there's just so much freedom in what you just described. It was so beautiful, and like a whole homeschool curriculum could have been your Robin Hood and all the things you did around that. So I love that. That's beautiful. Okay, so kind of Charlotte Masony, a little bit on the loose side, but that's good. I love that. I think that's really kind of the thing that we hope to do with the summit even was just to inspire people to know that you can do it any different way. And here's something that this person, their ideology kind of clings to, and this person's ideology, and what's your ideology? And I feel like that you've really found yours, and it's working really well. So is there a resource that you would recommend to people that you kind of turn to on the regular? I know you mentioned already that you used Easy Peasy for a little while. Is there something else like that whether it's a book or a person or anything like that you just call to when you need a little extra support?
Oh my. So my memory is not great, Lacey. That's something that I should have told you. The funny thing is, one of the books that I utilized, I just pulled it out of my bag before I came down to do this interview with you. And it's a very short book. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm not going to be helpful for that one. Oh, I can suggest Home Learning Year by Year.
Okay.
That book basically, so when people are just starting out for, to do homeschooling, I often get the question of, oh my gosh, what curriculum? That's always a big conversation. This book, it's probably about this thick, and it takes you from preschool to 12th grade, and it talks about everything that, your child, quote unquote, needs to learn through those years. And then it gives tons of descriptions of different type of curriculum that you can purchase and where you can purchase it. The book's a little outdated, but I still will, from time to time, grab it and look up something if I'm interested, because not all curriculum, as you know, is created equally. So there's times, like if you believe that children learn best by being parent-led with parent instruction where, just give me the lesson plan, I'm going to read it, follow it, do the prompt, my kid's going to circle the answers, that's cool. There's curriculum that is designed for that. However, if you feel children are more interest-led or things like that, or more hands-on, there's curriculum that's designed for that. So this book is helpful because it can help you kind of put those things into category, because the first thing I usually tell people just starting out is don't buy curriculum.
Right.
You need to figure out how you believe children best learn.
Yeah.
Then you need to build your curriculum around that. So Home Learning Year by Year, I don't want to lie to you and try to make up the author's name.
Yeah, no, that's
but
fine.
That's a good one that I do like to use.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I love that. Okay, so I think I would love just a couple of words of advice from you on how to help homeschoolers, new homeschoolers, or maybe even people who are just dealing with virtual school that's like it's totally different than regular public school, right? What words of support or wisdom would you offer them about their journey in that, and whatever comes to mind, really?
Honestly, I would really encourage you, whether you're a homeschooler or if you're thinking about homeschooling or exploring it, or now with, doing virtual classes where the teachers are doing instruction, I just encourage people to think about surrounding themselves with cheerleaders. Because homeschooling, I'm starting year 8, but I still have had days where I'm just like, why am I doing this? And if you have family or friends who don't understand your why, those are the worst people to turn to in those low moments because
Mhm.
they're gonna be like almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, yeah, why are you doing that? There's an easier thing. Just put them. And it's like once you get out of the fog, you're like, oh no, I really do want to homeschool them. I'm just having a low moment.
Right.
Don't hear my venting as saying I don't want to homeschool or I'm making a mistake. So you need people around you who are going to be the cheerleaders to remind you of your why and remind you like, all right, this is a bad day, shake it off, but it's just that, it's just a day, there's still tomorrow. There's been days where we literally, it might have been 10:30 in the morning and it wasn't looking good. And I said, you know what, guys, let's close our books
Yeah.
for the rest of the day. We
Yeah.
have tomorrow.
That's
And
right.
there's some, of course, we don't do that every day.
Yeah.
But yes, there's just some of those days where, for whatever reason, your kid keeps crying about math and you're like, I cannot take it anymore. Do not cry anymore over this math. I've gotten to the point where my kids would cry. I'd say, you're free to cry, but you need to go to your room to do that. So please go to your room and shut your door when you're finished crying. You
Mhm.
can rejoin us.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think you can have all the space that you need to feel the feelings, but I mean, usually it's just frustration and they just need to take a deep breath. So, but
Mhm.
yeah, that's such good. And I thought that too when you were talking about, you sort of your first step was call your cousin who homeschools and connect with your one friend, and that is so true. Finding that support is so huge. And I think a lot of times we think of homeschool as like these people who are off isolated in their homes by themselves all the time, and that couldn't be further from the truth. We are so well connected and reliant on one another that I mean I can't imagine doing this solo. It would be nearly impossible. So very, very,
Yeah.
very good advice. All right, Courtney. Well, thank you so much. People, you can connect with Courtney in a lot of different ways. She has a website and she's on Instagram. Courtney, tell us what those links are, and we will share those along with our on YouTube and whatnot as well. But please go ahead and share.
Sure. So the website is specifically related to my book, The Rumble Hunters. I have a copy if it's okay to show it.
Yeah, show it. Yay!
My first book, I hope you can see, The
Yeah.
Rumble Hunters. It launched in February this year, and it's a story about a young boy who is awakened by a mysterious rumble. And so he goes on a hunt to find the sound. So along the way, he takes his dog, he takes his fish, his lizard. Everyone has to come. He needs help. He takes his older brother, the baby sister. And so it's just adventurous, full of imagination type of hunt that he goes upon. So that can be purchased, and I can autograph it at my website, www.courtneybdunlap.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then Instagram, you can follow me at Courtney_B_Dunlap. I knew there was another underscore, Courtney_B_Dunlap. That's my Instagram handle, so you can follow me there.
Yay. So do that. Follow her. I think part of building that support and feeling supported is having people that are just in your feed regularly who are supporting you and sharing good information and helpful resources. And she does that. So definitely check her out and stay connected. Courtney, thank you so much for being on the call with us. I appreciate you so much for joining us in the summit as well. And yeah, just have a great day. Keep in touch.